In July of 2017, I took a solo trip to South Carolina after a tough breakup. I just needed something mindless, something distracting, so I spent a few days exploring the coast before stumbling upon an old theme park called Seabreeze Shores. It wasn't on my GPS, and I don't remember seeing any billboards or ads. It looked dated, like something stuck in the late 80s, with faded signage, barely any visitors, and music playing over crackling speakers. But something about it pulled me in. There was no ticket booth, just a turnstile that clicked open when I pushed it. I figured maybe it was one of those pay-per-ride kind of places. Inside, there were barely any people. A few families with kids here and there, but no long lines, no bustling staff. I told myself it was just a local, half-forgotten attraction, nothing weird about that. I wandered around for maybe an hour, riding one or two coasters that honestly felt like they hadn't been inspected in a decade. Then I noticed a ride I hadn't seen on the map posted near the restrooms. It was down a cracked path behind a cluster of overgrown hedges, half hidden from view. The sign above the gate read, "The Hollow." The lettering was flaked and rusted, but the bulbs were still lit in a soft orange glow, flickering now and then. No one was in line, no operator, just a set of metal gates that slowly creaked open when I stepped forward, as if something was waiting for me. I hesitated, thinking maybe this ride was shut down, but a recorded voice crackled to life from an unseen speaker above. "One seat available, proceed quickly." Proceed. I stepped onto the platform. There was a single cart like those used in old ghost house rides. The cart didn't have any safety bars or buckles. Before I could reconsider, it jolted forward on its own, pulling me into a tunnel of complete darkness. At first, I figured it was just another haunted house-type ride, the kind where skeletons pop out and cheap animatronics scream. But this one felt off. There were no speakers, no cheesy Halloween music, just silence. I tried using my phone's flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. It wasn't out of battery, it just wouldn't respond. The ride began to descend. What started as a slow slope gradually turned steep, and my body pressed hard into the seat as the cart spiraled downward. The air grew colder, damp and sharp-smelling, like rot. There was no wind, yet my hair moved slightly, as if brushed by invisible fingers. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear soft scraping sounds, metal against concrete perhaps, echoing just ahead. Then, finally, light. We entered a dim corridor, illuminated by swaying overhead bulbs. They swung as if someone had just run through the hallway. The cart creaked forward, passing rooms with windows instead of props. Each window looked like it belonged to a different house. In one, a family sat motionless at a dinner table. No movement, no blinking. Their eyes were sunken black holes, their mouths stretched open far too wide. In another window, I saw a mirror, just a mirror, except I wasn't in it. The ride kept moving, turning left, then abruptly stopping at a scene that looked real, too real. A room filled with boxes and office chairs. A single desk lamp flickered. On the far wall, someone had scribbled something in what looked like dried mud or paint. "You should not be here." Then the lights went out again, and something whispered, barely audible, behind me. I turned my head quickly, but there was no one there, and yet it had breathed. The cart began moving again, faster this time. Corners blurred, lights stuttered, my chest tightened, and I couldn't tell if it was panic or something else pressing in. I began to feel nauseous, dizzy. It felt like I had been down there for an hour. Then the cart slammed to a stop hard. I was facing a wall, a plain, grey wall, no exit door, no track beyond it, just the end. I waited for something, anything to happen. Then I noticed movement to my left. A sliding panel slowly opened, revealing a narrow hallway bathed in dull red light. The recorded voice returned, distorted this time. "Exit here!" With no other option, I stepped out. The floor beneath my feet was sticky, and the air felt heavier than before. I followed the hallway for what felt like forever, turning corners, descending stairs, then climbing more. I must have walked in circles. I started yelling, banging on walls, until finally I pushed open a rusted emergency door and stumbled back into sunlight. But something was wrong. The park was empty, completely empty. No music, no families, no staff. Worse, the rides were rusted over. Not just worn, broken, crumbling, overtaken by vines and weeds, like they hadn't been used in decades. I ran to the parking lot and my car was gone. The pavement had split and cracked, trees poked through the lot like nature had swallowed it. I pulled out my phone, no signal, no date. The screen was black and unresponsive. I wandered for hours until I was picked up by a passing trucker on a highway I didn't recognize. He looked at me like I was crazy when I asked about Seabreeze Shores, said it had been shut down since 1986 after a series of disappearances. He asked me again what year I thought it was. I didn't answer because I wasn't sure anymore. In October of 2019, I took my niece to a family-friendly Halloween theme park called Hollow Trails, tucked in the outskirts of Salem, Oregon. The place was known for its vintage carnival aesthetic, roaming performers, and a haunted hayride that had glowing reviews. It was my sister's idea. I wasn't a huge fan of theme parks, but I figured some quality time with my niece wouldn't hurt. The weather was gloomy that day, overcast, with a creeping mist that made the whole park feel more atmospheric than festive. The entrance was vibrant, strewn with orange and purple lights, bubbling cauldrons and fog machines lining the cobblestone path. Actors in old-timey costumes roamed the area, handing out treats and posing for pictures. My niece was ecstatic. I remember thinking it was all pretty well done, especially for something built on such an obviously limited budget. Every ride had a vintage flair, faded paint, creaky wood structures, carousels with chipped horses. Charming in a way. We went on a few of the tamer rides, watched a pumpkin juggling act, and finally lined up for the hayride. But while we were waiting, a man in a porcelain jester mask approached. His costume was intricate, hand-sewn black and crimson suit gold buttons and ruffled cuffs. He didn't speak, didn't offer candy or wave like the others, just stood there, still, tilting his head slightly whenever I glanced at him. My niece didn't seem to notice, too busy running around the nearby hay bales. When I turned again, he was gone. I assumed it was just part of the experience, but something about the way he stood made my stomach knot. It wasn't performative, it felt observant. After the hayride, which was surprisingly underwhelming, we went to grab some cider and cotton candy. That's when I noticed them again. More performers, but this time not mingling. They were walking in a line, slowly. About a dozen of them, clowns, jesters, a woman in an old wedding gown with a cracked porcelain face. No music, no fanfare, just slow, synchronized steps through the back pathways of the park. None of the other guests seemed to acknowledge them. I pointed them out to my niece, but she didn't see anyone. I laughed it off, said maybe it was part of a secret attraction or show we weren't supposed to know about yet. As it got darker, we decided to call it a night. But on the way out, we passed a small alley between two faux castle buildings. The same line of masked figures stood there, motionless. I stopped walking, their heads turned in perfect unison toward us. I blinked. One figure in the back raised a hand slowly and pointed at me. Just me. No movement from my niece. She tugged my arm, asking what I was looking at, but when I looked again, the alley was empty. Back home, I chalked it up to tiredness, sensory overload, maybe even stress. But that night, after dropping off my niece, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. On my back windshield, smeared in condensation, was a crude red, smiley face. Not spray paint, not marker, just a streak through the moisture, as if someone had traced it with a finger. I tried to wipe it away, but it just reappeared the next morning. This time, it was drawn inside the glass. That entire week, I started seeing them. Reflections in windows that didn't match my movements, that same jester mask peeking behind crowds on the subway, a hand slowly waving from the bushes near my apartment complex. I tried to convince myself it was anxiety. Maybe Halloween had just gotten into my head. I even talked to a friend who joked about how I was haunted by a theme park parade. By the third night, the knocking started, always from different parts of the apartment, soft, methodical knocks on my bathroom mirror, on my closet door, on the bedroom window, even though I lived on the 5th floor. Each time I checked, no one was there, but I'd find confetti, just a few pieces, on the floor where the sound had come from, the same faded kind they used at Hollow Trails. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to drive back to the park to see if maybe someone had pranked me or if my mind was just feeding off a loose thread of paranoia. But when I got there, the entire park was gone. No lights, no booths, no decorations. Just a large, overgrown lot with rusted fencing and a crooked sign hanging sideways that read, "Hollow Trails condemned by the State Order 2004. I double-checked. The date was correct. The place had been shut down 15 years ago after a ride malfunction led to multiple deaths. I even found an archived article online. One of the dead was a performer in a porcelain jester mask. I sat there in my car, shaking, scrolling through the photos until one image stopped me cold, a photo of the final parade that had marched before the accident. 12 masked figures in elaborate costumes, the same ones I had seen, and at the very back, just barely captured in the blurry photo, was me. Or someone who looked exactly like me, wearing the same jacket I had worn that day, standing still, watching the parade, long before I ever stepped foot into that place. In June of 2016, I was working part-time as a seasonal cleaner at a now-defunct amusement park called Pinefall Ridge, tucked deep in the mountains of Colorado. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I needed the extra cash for school, and the park had this eerie, nostalgic charm to it, like it had once been something spectacular, but time had quietly stripped the color away. Most of the rides were decades old, with chipped paint and faded mascots, and only a few attractions actually drew crowds anymore. I mostly worked night shifts, cleaning up after the last guests had gone and prepping the grounds for the morning crew. There were usually only 3 of us on the entire park during those hours. The others kept to their designated zones, and I preferred mine, the Western-themed section at the far edge. It was quiet, isolated, and no one ever really bothered to check on it, which is probably why I was the one who discovered the locker. It was my 3rd week when I noticed it. Tucked behind the saloon shootout attraction, hidden behind stacked props and old barrels, was a narrow steel locker with no number and a rusted padlock dangling open. It was strange because all lockers used by staff were on the other end of the park, and this one didn't match the usual design. It looked older, hand-forged even, like it didn't belong in the park at all. Out of curiosity, I opened it. Inside was a neatly folded uniform, one I'd never seen before. It looked like it belonged to an old park mascot, a faded blue and white outfit with a smiling badge stitched onto the front that read "Howdy." No character name, just that. Beneath it, a mask, grinning from ear to ear, cartoonishly wide with exaggerated features. It had the uncanny look of something meant to delight children, but now only managed to unsettle. The inside of the mask was lined with thick padding, and carved into the foam delicately with what looked like a knife was a single sentence: "He's not gone, just waiting his turn." I shut the locker immediately, chalking it up to some elaborate prank by bored employees from years past. But that night, as I was finishing up in the same section, I heard something, not footsteps, not voices, but jingles. The kind of canned, cheerful melody you'd expect from a kids' show or a costumed performer's routine. It echoed faintly from behind the saloon facade. I froze, thinking maybe one of the sound systems had glitched. I turned the corner, fully expecting a dusty speaker to be playing an old tune on loop. There was no speaker, just the locker, open again, and the uniform was gone. I didn't report it. I should have, but something told me no one would take it seriously. The next night, things escalated. I arrived at my section to find props rearranged. Chairs pulled into a circle in the middle of the artificial dirt path, facing inward. A cowboy mannequin that was usually bolted to the stage was lying face down on the roof of the saloon. I thought someone was messing with me, until I noticed the footprints. They weren't shoe prints. They were too long, too narrow, and they were burnt into the dirt like something had been dragging red-hot metal along the ground. The trail led right to the locker, which was now sealed shut with a new padlock. I spent the rest of the shift in the break room, pretending to be sick. Over the next few days, staff started reporting small issues: trash cans knocked over, tools misplaced, turnstiles clicking on their own. No one made much of it, but I kept watching. The locker reappeared twice more in different locations, once behind the Ferris wheel, once near the main plaza, always unmarked, always open, always empty. Every time it showed up, something strange followed. One of the ride operators claimed he saw someone in a faded blue mascot suit walking through the food court after hours, waving slowly to no one. Security found nothing on the cameras. Eventually I quit. It wasn't worth the money, and I was losing sleep. But about 6 months later, I heard Pinefall Ridge shut down. A young employee had gone missing. Security footage showed him walking into the western zone just before midnight. He never came out. Police searched for weeks but found no trace, no signs of a struggle, no evidence left behind except a single locker. This time it was in the middle of the stage at the saloon shootout. Front and center, wide open. Inside they found the missing employee's shoes, clean, perfectly placed side by side. And behind them, folded neatly, was the same blue and white uniform and the mask, still grinning. When investigators reviewed older security tapes, they found something else, grainy footage from years prior when the locker first appeared. Each time, a different staff member interacted with it, opening it, moving it, even joking about it, and within weeks each one either quit, went missing, or was involved in an unexplained accident. No one ever traced the origin of the locker. There were no purchase records, no design schematics matching it in the park archives. It was never officially listed in any inventory. It was never supposed to be there. A few weeks ago, out of morbid curiosity, I looked up the site. Pinefall Ridge has been bought out. A new company is rebuilding it into a modern experience. More rides, more attractions, updated everything. In the concept art they released to the press, I saw something chilling. It was subtle in the background, easy to miss unless you knew what to look for. A steel locker, unmarked, just barely open, and next to it, the blurry outline of something grinning. Theme parks are supposed to be places of joy, thrill and childhood nostalgia, but sometimes, beneath the lights and laughter, something darker lingers. Whether it's a ride that leads nowhere, a parade that shouldn't exist, or a locker that remembers every name. Not all attractions are meant to be found. If these stories gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, subscribe and hit the bell icon, because the next horror might be waiting just beyond the ticket booth.